Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Crosshairs, the program at ThePrint where we discuss the big national or regional security issue of the week. And of course, today it's the BRICS summit. We've seen the expansion of BRICS to become a much larger body with 6 new members. Don't ask me what the acronym is going to be. But the most important element of that BRICS conversation is something that didn't happen, which was a much rumored bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping of China, where they were expected to, as it were, seal the deal or make progress on the crisis on the line of actual control. I'm joined now by Manoj Joshi, Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and author of a book published earlier this year, which is an authoritative account of the LAC conflict and the wider geopolitics around it. Thank you, Manoj, for making the time to join us. My first question would be the Xi-Modi meeting. A lot of talk about it over the last few days. How important would it actually have been for these two leaders to get together in South Africa for progress to be made in this border conflict?
Well, Praveen, as you know, the two leaders had last met at a formal summit meeting, agenda-less summit meeting in 2019 in Chennai. Thereafter, they had apparently a brief meeting at the Bali summit. And thereafter, this meeting has taken place. Again, they have conversed. We don't know whether they sat down and conversed, whether they stood up and conversed. Some people tell me that they actually had a fairly detailed conversation at the retreat. But all that is a matter of speculation. So there is no formal meeting. So there's no question of any kind of a press release or a joint, leave alone a joint press release.
Right. The principle of settling the crisis we've seen on the LAC since the Galwan crisis seems to be settled. You've had this sort of disengagement and no patrol zones set up at Pangong and a bunch of other places. What is the problem, Manoj, on applying the same principle in Depsang? Why do you need two heads of government to discuss a principle?
Well, Depsang is somewhat different. Depsang is a much larger area. It's 972 square kilometers, meaning Depsang is like a bulge into the Chinese positions under the Chipchap River area. And the Chinese are not comfortable with this bulge because the Chinese have some kind of a worry at the back of the head that the Indians could mass tanks in the DBO area and strike towards their road because that's a relatively flat terrain. But, actually, equally, they have us in a very difficult position out there. They are very proximate to our DSDBO road.
This is Daulat Beg Oldie.
Daulat Beg Oldie, Darbuk Shiok, Daulat Beg Oldie road. So they are very proximate to it. So the nature of this buffer zone that is sought to be created would be different from the others. In the case of the others, I would say whether it is Pangong So, whether it is PP 15, 16, and 17A, there is no immediate threat to either side's interests. Here, there's a feeling on both sides that the other side will gain advantage if a buffer zone is created. Our road becomes very, very vulnerable, Our road, that is the Daulat Beg Oldie Dabruk Shiok road, becomes very vulnerable. And I think for that reason, there is also, of course, another history there. The history is of 1962. So as part of forward policy, we had established posts in these areas.
And these are the posts that till 2020 or so we seem to have been regularly sending patrols to, which are now blocked. Would that be correct?
I beg your pardon?
Well, these forward policy posts in 1962 were set up, were pretty much the same positions.
Yes.
Until 2020, we were sending patrols to.
Absolutely.
They are now blocked off.
They were set up there and they were wiped out within the first 24 hours of the conflict. And the Chinese, I think, feel, and they don't want to say it, that this is the area which we had captured from you guys, because this was not actually an area which they had formally claimed earlier. Now it's a kind of a retroactive claim which they are trying to create out there. So there are lots of complicated things which makes this particular area a more difficult area than the others.
Now, you've had negotiations at the level of the corps commanders, you've had negotiations at the level of major generals to try and figure out these, iron out the bulges, as you're saying. It was expected that a political meeting would give a push, and you had these references to disengagement. But now it all seems to have become sort of recrimination, with China saying that India requested the meeting, India saying China requested the meeting. How is this, how is this really important or relevant? Why are both countries so keen to show that the other side is suing for peace?
Well, it's also this style of working. I have a feeling that the Chinese work in a much more pyramidal fashion, in the sense Xi Jinping talks about the big, large picture, and they give directions to the lower functionaries, who are then supposed to execute it. In our case, it tends to be much more flatter, that sometimes decisions are taken at the very high level, maybe at the NSA level or something like that. So in this case, if people expected that Xi Jinping personally would undo something which his foreign minister had not quite done, I think they were mistaken, in the sense, as it said, that the process goes down and the process also goes up the pyramid. And Xi Jinping is not likely to overrule unless they have already discussed it previously. So now, obviously, here they must have discussed that we are not going to budge. So no amount of personal diplomacy or personal approach by Prime Minister Modi would have approached.
So I want to go back a little to Prime Minister Modi coming to office 2014. Here's a prime minister who's not burdened by India's defeat in 1962 and the forward policy. He seemed much more, politically able to do a deal, much more willing to do a deal than even past prime ministers. Why do you think the Chinese didn't bite? 2019, they have this summit meeting, and it all seems to go downhill from there into the Galwan crisis and so on.
This issue really about the whole line of actual control. Line of actual control back in the 50s and 60s was more about establishing strategic boundaries, meaning we were trying to establish our boundary, they were trying to establish their boundary, and they had need of that area because it connected Xinjiang with Western Tibet. In our case, our need was it was more of a legal case. But the point is, we didn't press it strongly. So the Chinese occupied that area. And now they say they were, typical of them, as they say in Tibet, we have been here since ancient times. Okay, so this is this is what they say. But the point is that now the border is not about the border, because effectively you can salami slice maybe 5 or 10 kilometers here and there, But besides, there are strong armies on both sides of that line of actual control. So no one's going to change the border in any fundamental way. So now the border is more about, from the Chinese point of view, keeping India off balance, because their infrastructure is better. They are able to deploy forces in certain areas much more quickly than we can. And our deployment has been basically defensive. So they are able to, they use this unsettled border to keep India off balance. And that off balance has to do not so much about the border itself, but our relationship with the United States, our relationship with our neighbors in South Asia and Tibet.
This is a nice segue into the whole sort of wider BRICS picture, the border not being a border. BRICS now seeing the expansion of what was a small 5-member group with 6 new members. In those 6 new members, some apparently countries at odds like Iran and Saudi Arabia, some affluent countries like Saudi Arabia, but also some countries in a financial mess, for example, Egypt. Is this China sort of, again, asserting its muscle in a reborn kind of non-aligned movement? Should India be worried that China is taking over this forum as well?
Well, I think there should be no doubt the weightage that China has in the BRICS. It has a GDP more than twice the size of all the other members combined. Its economy may have slowed down, but it's still growing fast, meaning it's growing at 5.2, according to IMF, just as ours is going at 5.9. Now, It has played a significant role in getting 2 of the new members, Saudi Arabia and Iran, to become friends. So this is an important marker. And it is also the largest trading partner of South Africa, India, and Brazil, as per the 2022 figures. So it has a huge amount of clout. And when it comes to the numerous other countries, it is able to, so within the organization. Now, of course, the problem in such an organization is that it works on consensus. So every member has this equal vote. And now you will have 11 members. You see? Now, so to getting 11 members to work together on something, you have to have some kind of wherewithal. And the country that seems to have the wherewithal is China. So it's not a simple kind of an equation where you say that, these are pro-Chinese, this is anti-Chinese. That's not there.
I want to go back to 1962 again, because that was the time also that was at the high noon, if you like, of non-alignment, of people talking about staying away from the competing Cold War blocs of the Soviet Union and the United States. And at that point, I mean, one of the theses given for why China went to war was to tell the region or these other non-aligned powers that it, not India, was boss. Do you think there's a similar motivation behind what China is doing on the LAC to show that it's the big regional daddy and that people should pay it attention?
I think, always at that time also it is a combination of factors. Don't forget that India was also getting closer to the United States. The end of the Eisenhower administration already, the US had started providing economic assistance to India in pretty large scale. So one was that factor, the US factor. Second factor, yes, what you're talking about, the non-aligned movement and third world countries. But the third factor, and perhaps the most important factor, was Tibet. In 1959, Tibet had an uprising. Dalai Lama has come away to India. So by 61 or so, the Chinese would have consolidated themselves again in Tibet. And so therefore in 62, as per their doctrine, they decided to launch what they called a defensive war, which had to do with Tibet. So I think Tibet is perhaps the more important factor in 62.
In which case, I'm genuinely confused about why China would continue to adopt this posture if geopolitical influence is one of them. Because surely for a few relatively inconsequential kilometers this way or that way on the line of control, why would it suit them to be locked in an adversarial relationship with India, particularly at a time when the United States is pressing them on their eastern seaboard and Taiwan very much is up in the air?
Well, it is a bit of mystery. Chinese deployments, their military deployments, are really directed towards Taiwan. And the Indian side, which is the southwest direction, was in a direction where, according to Taylor Frabel, they simply try to stabilize it and keep it stable. That's why part of the language that they are using even now is about maintaining peace and tranquility, stability, and that kind of stuff. But there is another streak. And I think that streak has to do with keeping India off balance with regard to our neighborhood in South Asia. See? And that is, so sometimes these are probably within that Chinese system, they are competing, groups or elements. And you see that being manifested in this. And the other part is that there is also certain disdain for India in the Chinese calculation. They think India, just doesn't have it. When they look at it, we and China were at the same level in 1990. Our GDPs were roughly equal, 370 per capita. GDP was about 370 or something like that dollars. Indian railways were superior to Chinese railways. Our technology industry, all these were better. And today the situation is completely changed. So they often wonder, and they look at India and they say that, is this country, does it really have it? And
Right.
In these circumstances, their calculations, let's keep them down. You see, let's keep them down, or let them accept our dominance in Asia. And the Chinese problem is, if they want to be a world power, they need to be a dominant power in Asia. And the one country which has its own vanity and gumption to challenge that is India.
And they
may not have anywhere near that equality right now, but we think we can get there.
Coming back then to the bigger picture of BRICS, we've seen Russia on the one hand with its mercenaries. We've seen the Chinese pumping in money into Africa. We've seen, Russia, as I said, projecting military power. We've seen that in other regions of the world as well, now in Latin America. Is India being squeezed out of its efforts to build some kind of influence and global reach?
Well, everything rests on your economic power. Everything is resting on Chinese economic power. A whole lot of their muscle. I mean, if you look at their trade, if you look at their in Latin America, or if you look at, you can go to Wikipedia, you'll get a whole list of countries with whose the Chinese are the premier trading partner. Investments in different places. So they do have a real power, and they are also creating institutions. Now they're doing it very cleverly. They're not challenging World Bank or IMF and that kind of stuff. But they've created the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, of which we are, of course, the number 2 shareholder. The new development banks with the so-called BRICS Bank, So these institutions are coming up. They're doing a good job, and many third world countries, African countries and other countries, because they're quite disappointed with the way the United States and all the Europeans are doing with regard to developmental assistance and things, because Japan is the only other country which is into official overseas development assistance. See, so the advantage that China has is enormous. It's already got those investments out there, meaning there are ports that it runs, there are railways that it has created, there are other facilities, but not all of those are pretty smart. Like Hambantota is well known. But
Sri Lanka, of course, smarter. The Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, which the Chinese invested in and have now taken over, but aren't really making a lot of money out of.
It's not. See, but the point is that the third world countries feel that China is a country they can approach, and they get they're much more relaxed in offering them aid and assistance. But the Chinese are tightening up. I must say that that what they did in 10 years ago is very different from what they are doing now. And the amount of assistance they are willing to offer has also come down fairly dramatically. And as it is, their economy is slowing down, and they have major problems within their country on the balance of the economy. So I don't think they will have that much of an outward-looking thing. They are supposed to really be concentrating, and their big challenge is to promote domestic consumption,
for which overseas markets have been historically sort of made up for. But now with an aging China and so on, major challenges at home.
Yeah.
A question there. I mean, is it also can we count it as a strength of the Chinese system that in many countries they have done business in Africa, they seem to have been able to get things done with a suitcase in ways that the West is not really comfortable with or not able to. There've been allegations of bribery and sharp practice swirling around them in Central Africa, which is a big source of cobalt and so on, lithium. Is that paradoxically a strength of their system, that they can do things?
No, I think they are probably aware of it, and they're aware that these kind of leaders, if you buy them off, they also can be bought off by the other side. You see, so I'm not sure, but the thing is that it gives them initial and immediate advantage. You see, and they are willing to go with that. And secondly, in many countries, there is also a clever strategy of trying to look out for strategic minerals and strategic resources. So, like in Congo, they want to go after the cobalt mines, and they want to tie up that whole electrical vehicle battery technology area. So there will be various places these investments will be made. And
we always depended on Russia to balance China out to some extent. In the current context where Russia itself has become heavily dependent on China, that dependency increasing after the Ukraine war, is this a smart bet? Are we digging a hole for ourselves by trying to create this balanced space, in alliance with what used to be called the third world countries, as well as Russia in groups like BRICS and so on and so forth?
Well, you see, the thing is that Russia also is not very comfortable with the Chinese alliance. See, it's any country that's a neighbor of a great power will always be uncomfortable. And there is certainly competition in, let us say, Central Asian republics. And the Chinese have been very careful not to tread on Russian toes out there. They've been careful, and they have been very soft and subtle in dealing with Russia. But the Russians equally understand that this is the moment of their weakness, and it would be very foolish of them to go beyond the point. And therefore, the Russians naturally also see India as a balancer. You see, so there's a mutual interest here between Russia and India. Now, the question is, there was a time when Russia would supply the top-end military equipment first to India and then to China. Now, it has been reversed. The S-400 was first given to China and then given to India. But then that is reflecting the reality, the current reality. But the Russians hope, and I'm not sure after the Ukraine war whether it should be, that at some point they will be able to reverse the situation.
In these multipolar arrangements like BRICS, the Chinese are wielding much more influence. Is it time for India to consider stepping back or stepping away from these arrangements? Or should it stay engaged?
See, India can't afford to step back. For us, multipolar, multilateral, plurilateral are very important devices, because we are at the end of the level of middle power. It is China which claims to be multilateral and etc. Is actually into a bilateral competition with the United States. And it is somehow trying to convince all of us that China is representing us, but it's representing itself. So there is a new Cold War on between China and United States. And we there, the global South, and I think our people are aware of this, meaning External Affairs Minister Jaishankar and others have a certain understanding of this situation. We are aware of it, and we are therefore, like through the G20 and others, trying to establish our leadership with the global South. And we are not saying so in so many words, but we are not saying that, look, China is not really global South, China is something else. But China goes out of its way to try to claim that it's multilateralist, etc., etc.
And we're sort of pushing back or using these stages, if you like, to push back against that sort of claim of China to be the sole spokesperson for this entire gamut of nations.
Yeah, well, but the Chinese are careful, but often when you scratch them a little bit, that the reality becomes very obvious. If you look at a 2017 Chinese paper on the Asia Pacific, the Chinese say big powers should not misunderstand each other's motives. As far as the small powers, they should stay out of everyone's way. I think sometimes it comes through.
Thank you so much for your time, Manoj. Always a pleasure talking to you. And I hope we'll have lots of opportunities to welcome you back on Crosshairs. Not too many, given that we tend to discuss these things when there's a crisis or a problem going on. But thank you again for your time this weekend.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.